Brendan, a video game designer, explains that scientists put rats inside mazes to study how organisms use memory to learn, adapt, and evolve by creating an internal map of their world. He reads these studies all the time because he uses their principles to design his games, and he emphasizes that humanity would be lost without memory. Brendan goes to the beach with his wife Claire and their daughter Sam. They have a great time together, and after a short nap, Sam announces that she will go look for shells with her Curious George toy, promising not to get in the water. However, while Sam is distracted by the shells, the waves take the monkey away, prompting her to enter the water to retrieve it. Unfortunately, the sea is too strong, and she never returns. The family offers their full support to the parents during the funeral, but Brendan and Claire remain devastated. Claire still believes this isn't real. A few months later, Claire decides it's time to move and begins packing Sam's room. Brendan, on the other hand, is not ready yet, and he immediately freaks out, pleading with his wife to return everything to its proper place. When he grabs one of his daughter's favorite books, he notices that the title Berenstain Bears is written with an A rather than an E, as he recalls. Later that night, Brendan can't sleep and hears a noise. With a bat in hand, he goes into the kitchen and nearly attacks, but it's just his brother-in-law Matt raiding the fridge. They share a late-night snack while chatting, and Brendan inquires about the book title. Delighted to learn that Matt, too, believed it was written with E. Brendan is still unable to sleep, so he searches the internet for an explanation and comes across thousands of articles. Many people have the same memory as him and believe it's a conspiracy, but Brendan eventually discovers the Mandela effect, a phenomenon in which a large group of people share false memories. They usually blame it on alternate timelines or parallel universes, and the name refers to the fact that many people believe Mandela died in prison. The next morning, as Claire prepares to return to work, Brendan notices a family photo on their refrigerator. When Brendan asks about the photo, Claire confirms that it was taken at the Griffith Observatory. Brendan, on the other hand, recalls taking the same picture at the Pacific Science Center. Claire assumes he's just confused and returns to work. Brendan then shows Matt what he's discovered about the Mandela effect, which includes a detailed explanation and numerous examples such as Mandela's death, Darth Vader's quote, and the spelling of Looney Tunes. Brendan is convinced they are traveling between parallel realities or participating in a simulation, but Matt does not believe him. Brendan delves deeper into the phenomenon over the next few days, watching numerous documentaries on topics such as string theory and the possibility of a real matrix. Brendan takes copious notes and becomes obsessed with the subject, most likely as a coping mechanism for his grief. Brendan goes to see a priest one afternoon and asks why God would take the life of a child like Sam. The priest explains that Sam's death was not God's plan or desire, but rather the result of free will, which many regard as God's greatest gift to humanity. Brendan returns home and begins investigating free will as part of his obsession. Brendan eventually meets Matt again and continues to bother him about the subject. Matt explains that he spoke with a friend who is a neurologist, and she explained that our brains aren't perfect. Memories become scrambled, and there are many gaps that are filled with external information. Brendan, on the other hand, is stubborn and refuses to accept that it could all be a coincidence. Claire later admits to Brendan that she is concerned about him because he has recently become withdrawn, and she insists that he share his problems. Brendan asks her to describe the Monopoly Man, and Claire says he wears a monocle, but when she checks the game box, she notices the little man has nothing on his face. Brendan then pulls out Sam's Curious George book, claiming that the monkey used to have a tail in the drawings and swearing that Sam's plushie did as well. Claire objected to their daughter's death being used in this way, but Brendan persisted, pointing out that Claire even stated after the funeral that it didn't feel real. When Brendan starts talking about realities shifting, Claire snaps and scolds him for refusing to move on and instead focusing his grief on this stupid obsession. Later, Brendan and Claire go on a double date with Matt and his new boyfriend. Brendan is lost in thought and barely paying attention to the conversation, so he tries to escape to the bar, but Matt reminds him that he and Claire must support each other. Brendan admits this is true and returns to the table. However, as soon as he gets home, Brendan returns to the computer to research the simulation theory, which claims that we live in a computer-programmed reality. Brendan's notes grow, and he begins to keep a board, desperate to find evidence of a parallel universe in which Sam is still alive. He watches videos of famous people talking about the subject, such as Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and eventually comes across the name Roland Fuchs, who claims to be working on a way to prove the simulation. Brendan refuses to give up and searches for Fuchs's current workplace before recording a video message for him. Brendan waits days and never hears back from Fuchs, so he travels to the university to speak with the doctor in person. However, Fuchs is too busy to hear a random fan's rambling. Later that night, Brendan tries to be a better husband by getting frisky with Claire, but he stops in the middle because he believes he hears Sam calling for him. Claire, frustrated, suggests he see a grief counselor. Instead of meeting with a counselor as promised, Brendan arrives at Fuchs's house the next day and persuades him to give him a few minutes of his time. Fuchs explains that the Mandela effect is simply a case of fake memories, but he also believes they are breadcrumbs left by the simulation we live in, which glitched after a system update. Brendan points out that if reality is just computer code, he should be able to hack it, but Fuchs dismisses this and takes him to the university. On their way there, they discuss the possibility that the world exists solely because a conscious being observes it. Brendan compares it to video games, where areas are only loaded when a player enters them. Otherwise, they do not exist. So instead of hacking the simulation, he should overload it to overwhelm the processor. Only a very powerful machine could accomplish such a task, and Fuchs reveals that this university has a quantum computer. They enter the lab together, but when Fuchs explains how to enter a code, they are interrupted by Dr. Manning, who is not pleased with Brendan's presence. The two immediately return to the doctor's house, where Fuchs explains that he believes the simulation attempted to stop him because he has a bug in the system, and reminds Brendan that ideas are dangerous things. Later that night, Brendan has a dream about Sam's death and awakens when he hears her call for him again. He rushes into Sam's room and notices a human shadow, which then glitches and vanishes. He tries to go for a drive to clear his mind, but he can't stop picturing the world as a massive chain of code linked to a quantum computer. He eventually falls asleep in the car and wakes up in a random alley downtown. He suddenly hears a horrible high-pitched sound and screams in pain as reality glitches, only to blink and wake up in his usual bed. When Brendan exits the room, he is surprised to see Sam in her own room, and Claire rushes to drag her to the bathroom. When he tries to follow them, he only sees his wife washing her teeth. Brendan thinks he's going insane, and Claire does her best to console him. Brendan then goes to the library to get a bunch of books on quantum computing and begins working on code that could overload the simulation. Brendan spends the next few days coding, which worries Claire. Sam appears in her parents' room and climbs into bed after having a nightmare. Brendan sleeps peacefully next to her, but when he wakes up in the morning, he finds an empty bed. Brendan goes downstairs thinking it was a dream, but Sam is still there, as if nothing had happened. Claire and Matt treat her normally, so Brendan contacts everyone he knows to confirm his suspicions. No one remembers Sam dying, so reality has been altered. He attempts to discuss this with Fuchs, but he refuses to answer his phone. Brendan believes the simulation returned his daughter in order for him to stop creating the code, but he doesn't mind because he's glad to have Sam back. The family spends a lot of time together and is very happy until one night when Claire awakens from a terrible nightmare in a bad state. She swears she's fine, but the next day Brendan discovers the breakfast on fire and Claire staring blankly. Brendan, determined to cheer her up, takes the family to paint pottery together. Suddenly he notices cracks on his pot, and Claire becomes enraged, smashing objects on the floor simply because they don't match the color she wants. Brendan decides to return home and tries to get Claire to rest, but she keeps staring at Sam and freaking out, claiming the girl shouldn't be there. Brendan, concerned that the reality shift is making his wife sick, asks Matt to babysit Sam and rushes to Fuchs' house, only to be greeted by the doctor's wife. It turns out that he deleted himself 2 months ago because he was not taken seriously by the scientific community. Brendan believes he saw Fuchs just 2 days ago, and a crack appears on the glass, which he interprets as a sign from the simulation. Brendan rushes home and resumes work on the code, determined to make things right. He also records a video for his family in case the simulation kills him, as he believes it killed Fuchs. While Brendan works, Matt cares for Claire, who has become catatonic. When the code is finally complete, Brendan visits the university and attempts to access the quantum computer, but is stopped by Manning, who attempts to contact security. Brendan jumps on him to stop him, but he pushes too hard, causing Manning to hit his head on the floor and die. Brendan feels terrible, but he still takes Manning's card key and goes. Brendan inserts his code into the computer using a USB stick and watches the numbers scroll as the computer lights flicker. When the machine begins to make strange noises, Brendan rushes outside only to discover that the parking lot is empty and his car has disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he's on a bus, and his wife calls to say she's not feeling well. At that point, he notices a passenger glitching as she moves across the bus floor, and a couple nearby also has glitching faces. Brendan gets off the bus and runs through the city, noticing various glitches, such as the time of day changing constantly, the trees changing colors, and the presence of two moons in the sky. Brendan eventually returns home and rushes to keep his wife and daughter close as the environment around them also glitches like crazy. Claire's face also glitches, and she screams in pain as the two moons collide in the sky before everything goes pitch black. The code then appears on the screen as the universe reboots itself from the beginning of time, including dinosaurs, lost civilizations, wars, and other significant events in human history. When the reboot finally ends, Brendan is relieved to be back on the beach with his family. When Sam says she's going to look for shells, Brendan makes her leave the curious George behind, saving her life. All right, that's a wrap for today. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. It really helps the channel. Leave a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and see you next time.